Downhill, and Willard didn't trust her being away for so long.
I'm fucking cold.
Police had learned the relationship was very volatile in
Hello.
the months leading up to her death. They were fighting, and
Please turn your
they
fan
were
off. It's
splitting
fucking
up.
cold in here.
And we learned in one of their fights that they were fighting over Barbara getting her own cell phone, and Willard just being very upset, you know, demanding to know, why do you have a cell phone?
We found out that they were sleeping in separate bedrooms. Willard would get a phone call on his cell phone. He would go outside in the yard, talk on the phone, and then come back in. But then she would get phone calls, and she would leave the house, and she'd be out in the yard talking on her phone. They were, I think, suspicious of one another, of having affairs.
We did a phone study on her home phone, and one thing was a number called to her house, I think 2 times the night of the murder, and then several times going back a couple days. And that phone number was not registered to her husband, Willard. We felt it could be a person trying to set her up, see if she was home or not.
It would be a strange coincidence that these phone calls were made at about the same time Barbara was being attacked. So that drew our suspicion. I don't believe in coincidences. The night the murder occurred, there was a series of 2 or 3 phone calls made to Barbara Purcell, kind of a short period of time, but close to one another, from the same origin phone. So we tracked that back to a guy named Willie Brown.
We did a background check on him. He had no arrest. He was not wanted on any warrants. And there was no connection to Barbara Purcell. We didn't know why he was calling her. but his phone is calling her phone several times, 6, 7 times, leading up to the time of the murder. We picked him up, brought him to the station for an interview. And his phone is calling her phone several times, 6, 7 times, leading up to the time of the murder. But Willie Brown just said he didn't know Barbara. He never called her, had no reason to call her. And we showed him the records. He verified that was his phone. And he said if it's coming from his phone, it must be a wrong number. But it's hard to buy since he did it 6, 7, 8 times, kept calling the same number. And this was going on, this interview, him saying he had no idea what it was, us saying it's here on paper. You have to explain this somehow. He was racking his brain. It took a while, but then he finally remembered he was calling some type of ad in the paper. And we got the newspaper, and we saw the number. He had inverted the last 2 numbers, which explained the whole thing. So that was a very unfortunate coincidence for Mr. Brown. We felt bad about it, but we had to get the answers.
They weren't able to eliminate him as a suspect. Well, I guess when I think about that, I think about, did one of his calls cause the person who murdered her to panic a little bit? Did it cause them to make mistakes because it was clear that someone had planned this?
Willie Brown was the only person on our radar besides Willard. And then we found out that her husband, Willard, was arrested the week before the murder.
Barbara was in the garage in their home. She was leaving her house early in the morning.
Willard jumped out from a hidden location and tased her with a stun gun. There was no argument. It was a complete attack, a complete ambush.
After the incident, she got in her car and drove to the hospital and saw a doctor to document that, in fact, she had stun gun wounds on her neck.
Willard, as a result of that, was charged with a domestic battery and he was taken to jail.
Probably took him a day or 2 to bond out, and she got an order of protection barring him from the house. I think prior to the stun gun incident, it was normal tension, argument, suspicion, but afterwards she was terrified of him.
She had told co-workers that she was afraid of him, and then she confided in them that she thought he might have had something to do with his first wife's death.
Willard was married before he married Barbara, and I asked her about the first wife and what happened. Barbara had told me that Willard's first wife, Crystal, had had a tragic accident, and at the time, coming from Barbara, I accepted it as true. But I remember thinking, well, that's kind of strange. That's not a typical way to die.
Willard Purcell and his first wife, Crystal. They used to live in a different neighborhood in Rockford, on Rockford Avenue. And she was found dead in a very similar situation as Barbara was.
The story was she was doing chores, she was doing laundry. Crystal was found dead at the bottom of the stairs in the basement. It was ruled an accident. And by the way that Barbara explained this situation at the time, I feel she accepted what she had heard as being true. But after the incident where Willard used the stun gun on Barbara's neck, Barbara started to believe that he had killed Crystal.
So in reviewing the Rockford City report, talking to the city detectives, the similarities were just over the top. Co-worker had called because Crystal hadn't come to work, and then they contacted the house. Nicole, their daughter, was at the house and said she had left for work, and work said she wasn't. She started looking around the house, and she went downstairs and found Crystal at the bottom of the stairs, laying face down, just like Barbara was. It appeared that she probably tripped down the stairs, rolled, struck her head on a pipe that was on the floor.
This type of a circumstance simply doesn't happen twice. Almost statistically impossible for it to happen like that. Like, oops, another one, you know? Yeah, right, come on.
During the autopsy, we observed that she had 3 blunt force trauma wounds to the back of her head, to the back right side of her head.
She also had some wounds on her hands, the back of her hands, that could be described, I guess, as defensive type wounds.
We're fortunate during the autopsy that the pathologist realized this could be potential bite mark evidence and properly photographed Barbara's hands. The bleeding indicated that it happened contemporaneously, the injuries to her head. And the bite mark also was indicative that she was trying to defend herself because it was on the back of her hand, and somehow someone was able to bite her hand while trying to attack her. We consulted with an odontologist who is a dentist who studies bite mark impressions. Ultimately, they wanted us to get impressions of Willard Purcell's teeth. And so we had to seek a court order to do that.
Willard said he was at work, but we did a phone study on his cell phone, and we found that that was hitting a tower near Naperville where his work was earlier in the day, but later in the day when he said he was still at work, his cell phone was hitting towers in the Rockford area. Well, once we knew he was in the Rockford area, we did a search warrant on his pickup truck, and we sent the plaster cast of the tire tracks to the crime lab along with the tires from Willard's truck. And the technician at the crime lab was able to determine that a tire of the same make and model as those on Willard's truck made the tire impressions.
Her wedding ring was missing, and there was a coin collection missing. So the police searched Willard Purcell's truck after they got a search warrant, and they found in his truck a garbage bag that contained jewelry and the coin collection, and they literally found Barbara Purcell's wedding ring.
We asked him about that during an interview, and he said she packed a bunch of stuff for him when she got the order of protection, and that bag of stuff was amongst the items that she packed for him and gave to him.
We've also obtained a search warrant for impressions of Willard's teeth, transported them to the dentist, and we got those impressions.
When the impressions came back, the forensic odontologist confirmed that the bite marks on Barbara Purcell's hands were consistent with Willard Purcell's teeth.
When this horrific crime first occurred, I was frightened. I was afraid. I felt that Willard was dangerous, and being around a dangerous person is scary. And then I remember when he had been arrested and charged that I was relieved in the moment.
I think it probably gave people a lot of comfort that he was going to be charged. And
Ha 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 ha.